Schoenfield, who was born in Detroit, Michigan in 1947. Actually went to Converse College down here in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and then off to Carnegie Mellon for a master's, and then a doctorate in his piano. He was an excellent pianist at the University of Arizona. But when he finished all of that schooling, like many of us who go through all of that schooling, after he finished, he's like, I don't know if I want to be a musician. It's just not so fun. So he sort of stopped playing music for a while, and he actually spent 4 years living on a kibbutz in Israel teaching mathematics to high school students. And he has a brilliant mind, I think, in so many ways. And a lot of his music is kind of mathematical in ways. It's really interesting. So he comes back after that and he decides he does want to do music, but he's not sure he really wants to be kind of a classical composer. He always thought of himself as kind of a folk musician, but he just wrote rather complicated music. He said, I don't consider myself an art music composer at all. The reason that my works sometimes find their way into concert halls is that at this juncture, there aren't many folk music performers with enough technique, time, or desire to perform my music. They usually write their own anyway. So he sort of felt kind of a fish out of water, but he started doing this kind of interesting composition, mixing all sorts of different types of music, from Broadway to Viennese to klezmer to ragtime and Dixie, and you hear it all in this piece. And the impetus for this cafe music, which comes out in 1987, was he was living in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and there was a restaurant there called Murray's Steakhouse, which has a little house piano trio that plays kind of dinner music while people are performing. And he said, the idea to compose cafe music first came to me in 1985 after I sat in one night for the pianist at Murray's Steakhouse in Minneapolis. Murray's employs a house trio which plays entertaining dinner music in a wide variety of styles. My intention was to write a kind of high-class dinner music which could be played at a restaurant, but might also, just barely, find its way into a concert hall. The work draws on many of the types of music played by the trio at Murray's. For example, early 20th century American, Viennese, light classical, gypsy, Broadway are all represented, and there is a paraphrase of a beautiful Hasidic melody incorporated into the second movement. So it really is this kind of kitchen sink approach, a mishmash of all sorts of styles, which could be a little bit weird, but I think it works in Schoenfield's case. One writer said, Paul Schoenfield's work is inspired by the whole range of musical experience. Popular styles, both American and foreign, vernacular and folk traditions, and historical traditions of cultivated music making, often treated with sly twists. He looks for his inspiration in the national spirit. That spirit is, however, multifaceted. Like Charles Ives, he enjoys the mixing of ideas that grew up in entirely different worlds, making them converse, so to speak, and delighting in the surprises that their interaction evokes. So you get these wonderful transitions from one style to the next, and it makes it very, very exciting to play. And another writer said, Paul Schoenfield writes the kind of inclusive and welcoming music that gives eclecticism a good name. He draws on many ethnic sources in music and assimilates them all into his own distinctive language. This is crossover art achieved with seamless craftsmanship. And so in this piece, you'll hear this wonderful first movement that has a lot of kind of Broadway, Hollywood styles to it, but again, mixes and matches with other types. Then there's this gorgeous second movement that begins with a piano solo, again in a rather bluesy kind of slow feel to it. But in the middle of that, we get that wonderful Hasidic Jewish melody, and this moment when the violin and cello come together, it just pulls at your heart, and it's just so beautiful. And the third movement, he sort of writes a tempo marking that seems impossible to play, and it is. And so we're not playing it that fast, but we're going to go as fast as we can. It really is just a kind of a crazy sort of a movement. In the middle of that, some people have heard the cantina music from Star Wars. It seems to be in there. He tries everything. There's a story about this. I had played this piece a few years back, and I thought I had played it pretty fast. I'd done a good job. And then I listened to From the Top on the radio, if you know that program for all the great child prodigies who are playing. And there was a group of 15-year-olds from the Juilliard Prep School playing the third movement at the tempo he wrote, which I didn't think was possible. And it was an astounding performance. And the crowd went wild, and Christopher Riley came up and he said, "That was just an amazing performance of that piece. It's so hard." And he said, "I see that you came in second at a recent competition. Who was first, God?" You just couldn't imagine playing anything that good. But we're going to give it a shot, and you'll see the excitement in that. Schoenfield said about this piece, very funny, he said, "This piece is not the kind of music for relaxation, but it's the kind that makes people sweat. Not just the performers, but the audience as well." So enjoy caffeine.